Hello everyone and welcome to Cinderful Gaming. I hope you're all doing well, I hope you're all staying safe, and most of all, I hope you're all fighting that war against the Grey. Today's video, we're going to talk Stormcast Eternals, and in particular, we're going to look at their allegiance abilities. We're going to review all of them, every artifact, every holy command, every command ability, and all of it. And we're going to give you some tactics and some units that we think benefit from all the different rules available to us in this particular section of the book. So we've got a lot to get through today, so let's get cracking on. Let's check out the allegiance abilities, the holy commands, the command traits, the spells, the prayers, the mount traits, and the sub-factions, all of it for Stormcast Eternals. And so here we're going to look at the Stormcast Eternals allegiance abilities. First of all, let's talk Stormhost. This is an allegiance ability that allows you to pick from one of the 8 sub-factions inside the Stormcast Eternals battle tome. Each of these sub-factions will give you an additional ability to use with your army, and we'll talk more about them later in the video. We then have the Guardians of the Heaven and Shields of the Mortal Realms rule. This is an ability to either pick your Stormcast Eternal army to be either Scions of the Storm or Stormkeep, and they will gain the keyword of either one of these for your entire army. Both these keywords will grant you additional abilities. For the Scions of the Storm, we will grant the ability Scions of the Storm. This allows you to deploy up to half your forces in the heavens above the battlefield, 1 for 1. So you can deploy 1 unit on the table and 1 unit on the heavens. Over the course of the game and up until turn 3, when you must bring on all remaining reserves, you can bring these units on 9 inch away from enemy units at the end of your movement phase. You then, for the Stormkeeps, get the Coalition Watchful Guardians rule that allows you to take Cities of Sigmar units from that battle tome as Coalition allies for your army, bringing 1 in 4 of your units in the army as a Coalition unit. The Shield of Civilization you also get for the army, where Stormkeep Redeemer units, so this is Liberators, Sequitors, Vindictors, and some other options as well, they all gain abilities that give them better control of objectives. In the first and second battle rounds, if any friendly Stormkeeper Redeemer units contest an objective partially or wholly within your territory, they count as 3 models instead of 1 for contesting that objective, and from the third battle round onward, any objective on the battlefield you count as 3 models for the purposes of controlling. In addition, if an enemy unit finishes a charge move within 1 inch of a friendly Stormkeep Redeemer unit within 6 inch of an objective you control, you roll a dice. On a 3+, the unit suffers D3 mortal wounds. Pretty nice when you add this on top of some of the other rules in the army, which can do some mortal wounds to units nearby. In addition to all of this, you will get the Blaze of Glory special rule, which all Stormcast Eternals models get. If a friendly Stormcast Eternal model is slain within 1 inch of an enemy unit, before removing that model, pick one enemy unit within 1 inch of the destroyed model and roll a number of dice equal to the wounds characteristic of that model, and add 1 to the number of dice you roll if the slain model is a Thunderstrike model. For each 6+, you do a mortal wound back to your opponent, so you can do some damage even in death. Pretty cool for an elite army with multiple wound units. With that all said, let's go look at all the enhancements for the army. And so our first enhancement, we're going to start looking at the command traits, and we'll start with Shock and Awe. So if your army is assigned to the Storm army and your general is on the battlefield at the end of your movement phase, you can subtract 1 from hit rolls for attacks that target units that have deployed from the heavens this turn. This is a pretty cool command trait if you've got, say, a Lord Imperator that we've got pictured down below in your army. The Lord Imperator allows you to deploy Thunderstrike units within 7 inch of your opponent, enabling you to get that charge a little bit better. This is pretty cool because it means things like Unleash Hell and stuff like that are going to be at, while only 1 negative, can really impact their ability to get other bonuses and sort of counteract that with their own inbuilt stuff. Things like Handgunners won't get their own +1, and unit size bonuses for +1 won't count, as you'll be -2 to hit for the turn. And also, if you can get into combat with those charges easier thanks to being 7 inch away, means you're going to be a -1 to hit in combat, and things like Annihilators with shields, which are already on that amazing 2-up save, or things like Protectors and other Paladins that can get to that 2-up save, are really good sort of dropping down, though remembering other Paladins like Protectors and such won't have the 7 inch charge range. This can definitely be some cool combinations to play around with this particular command trait. Staunch Defender is next, and this just allows us to reroll the dice to determine the number of mortal wounds caused by the Shield of Civilization rule to enemy units. This has to be within 12 inch of your general for it to work, but this works really well on something like Liberators, who themselves have Layla Tyrants, where they can do mortal wounds to enemy units that are near them at the end of the combat phase as well. So it just allows them to stack those mortal wounds a little bit better. So it works pretty well on something like them, one of the Redeemer units that already is doing some mortal wounds, plus Shield of Civilization, potentially 2d3 mortal wounds, re-rolling one of those two. Can definitely sort of do a nice little extra bit of splash damage for your Liberators. Envoy of the Heavens is next. So if a friendly Stormcast Eternals model is slain wholly within 12 inch of your general, you can add one to save rolls for attacks that target the slain model's unit for the rest of the phase. However, you cannot gain this benefit more than once, so you can never get more than +1 save from this ability. This is really cool on expensive units. So if you're running something like a Paladin heavy army, this is a pretty cool command trait, as generally your opponent's going to have to put multiple units into your units to see them lose models and remove from the table. This can really help you get some additional defensive benefits onto your unit. If you've lost one Paladin, which is 3 wounds and can be on a 2-up save, you then can add that extra one to start ignoring the Rend and continues to stay on that 2-up save unless your opponent is managing to throw out Rend 2 or mortal wounds at range. This can really just help the survivability of, I guess, expensive heavy wound model units. So things like Dracothian Guard and even Stormdrake Guard all benefit from this really well as well. And so the last command trait we have for the Stormcast Eternals inside their battle tome is Master of the Celestial Menagerie. Now, this particular command trait has been FAQ'd to have changed how it works. First of all, it is now, if your general is a Behemoth battlefield roll model and is on the battlefield, you subtract 1 from wound rolls for melee attacks that target friendly Stormcast Eternal units that have the Behemoth battlefield special roll. So this means that we do not get to put it on any of our Stormdrake Guard units, as they are not Behemoth battlefield role models. However, this does work on all your character dragon monsters. So this is the cool ability to have on, say, a Knight Draconis, or on your Lord Celestin or Stardrake or Drakesworn Templar, if you're going to include Krondus or Karazai in your army, as well as it will benefit those gigantic Draconith monsters. A really cool one if you're going to take your general, I guess, and as a Stardrake or as the Knight Draconis, and you don't have any other sort of command traits that you wish to take, which could definitely be a benefit to you. But really, this is especially good if you've got Krondus or Karazai in your force. Moving into our Stormforged weapons, for the Force, we have the Blade of Heroes, which allows us to reroll hits that target either heroes or monsters picking one of our riders' or weapons, or our models' weapons, remembering mounts can't receive the weapons here. This is particularly good, I think, on the Knight Draconis. He's got a lot of attacks, so he can make really good use of those rerolls, and with 3s to hit, he can go down to 2s with a command point. 2s rerolling 1s on 5s against monsters, with Rend of pretty decent variety in Rend 3 and 2s to wound. Damage 2 can be pretty good versus some other enemy heroes or monsters. He can be a great little sort of counterpiece to your enemies, monsters, and heroes. Next up, we have the Hammer of Might. If the unmodified wound roll for this weapon is a 6, you can double the damage of that weapon's attack. So this is pretty cool on something with a lot of attacks, and I actually like this on the Knight Zephyros. The Knight Zephyros already has an ability where it can teleport around the battlefield, riding the wind's etheric, and I think it could be a really cool like lone wizard hunter with this particular weapon. 6 attacks here means you're probably likely to hopefully try and get 1 through at least, and the amount of Rend and the damage 1 and the amount of attacks going through, you could probably try, with a little bit of luck, removing an enemy wizard a turn with this. If they're just that 6-up armor save wizard, they're probably not going to stand much of a fight against the Knight Zephyros. And lastly, we have the Fang of Dracothion. If any wounds caused by this weapon are allocated to an enemy model, that enemy model suffers 1 mortal wound at the end of every turn afterwards. This is pretty cool. You probably want this on something with high attacks value, like a Lord Celestin on Dracoth with the axe. He's got a decent amount of attacks there, and also got some decent Rend on it to get through these hits. He can be really good at doing some chip damage along with this. You could also definitely combine this with one of the mount traits you have available to it, with the Dracos Etheric Swiftness, giving you the extra pile-in ability to sort of hit this from out of your opponent's pile-in range. definitely works there as well. Or indeed, Celestial Instincts would work really well with this, giving you retreat and either still shoot and charge next turn, able to sort of place this on multiple enemy heroes and monsters and units that you might be trying to take down to do an extra little bit of splash damage across the table with. Moving along into armors, we have the Heaven's Roar armor lots, and first of all we have the Drake Scale armor. You can reroll save rolls for attacks that target the bearer that have a damage characteristic of 2 or more. However, it has been FAQ'd that random damage is not affected by this, so D3 and D6 damage weapons do not allow you to reroll armor saves against them. However, this I think goes really well on a lot of Stormcast heroes, to be honest. Anyone who can get down to a 2-up save, and especially if you've got lots of wounds, your opponent is going to be trying to churn through with high damage attacks. This could really be useful on something like a Star Drake, Knight Draconis, even Lord Celestins on Star Drakes or Celestial Dracolines, and all of those sort of more heavier wound heroes with that 8 or above sort of wounds value. Next in our armors, we have the Mirror Shield. The bearer of this item cannot be picked as the target of a shooting attack unless the attacking unit is within 9 inch. Once again, this is just really good at things like a Star Drake, making them protected from long-range mortal wound shooting. Things like Sentinels and Marathis and her bow snakes all are going to need to get real close, which is not where something wants to be near a Star Drake. If your opponent's managing to try and shoot and get those units within 9 inch, you can lay the traps down and spring it. If your opponent does manage to kill this thing, you can send in some reinforcements to go deal with the offending shooting units. And lastly, we have the Amulet of Slivered Sigmarites. Your opponent cannot reroll hit rolls for attacks that target the bearer wearing this. I particularly like this on the smaller heroes in the Stormcast Eternals Battle Tome. This gives them a little bit more protection against ranged damage output. You could use this as well as like sticking near your own units for that -1/2 hit with Lookout Sir, just to give them that little bit more protection and make your opponent think twice about having to either shoot them and put more effort in or not shoot them to get rid of them off the table. Moving on to our Artifacts of the Tempest, and we've got the Quick Silver Draft. This one is another one I think is cool on a Star Drake, giving you that ability to fight at the start of combat phase. This can be really useful with Star Drake because what this will enable you to do is actually get those Cavernous Jaw attacks off really early, meaning you can sort of start to pick your opponent's models apart. Which is nice. And also, it works well on heroes that are taking a bit of damage and maybe are not going to get to fight or stick around for long or not last through the combat phase. So it can definitely work on something that's got a few more wounds. You go in, you take your first lot of damage, and you're probably dying the second turn in combat, but the Quicksilver Draft will allow you to get 2 rounds of your own combat in, potentially either saving your model as well, or at least getting as much damage through as possible before your larger model is removed. Next we have the Luckstone. Once per game before making hit, wound, save, run or charge roll, you can choose the result. This result cannot be rerolled, so you can't be forced into rerolling it, but all modifiers do apply to the result, so the dice can be modified by things like Kairos. I like this on particularly playing Signs of the Storm, dropping down a hero hunting character like a Knight Questor down to go hunt some wizards in the backfield, enabling him to auto charge and get in with that and go kill some wizards. And lastly, the Obsidian Amulet. Once again, one of those ones that's just good on your big heroes, be that the Star Drake, Lord Celestin, the Drakesworn Templar, Knight Draconis, any of them, even your, I guess, mid-range ones, things like the Taurolon, the Lord Arcanum on Dracoline, and all of that. The Obsidian Amulet allows you to ignore the effects of spells and endless spells on the bearer until your next hero phase. You declare you're using it once per battle in your own hero phase. What I like about this, first of all, it can stop you being affected by endless spells. If your opponent's lining up some endless spells for the turn to hit one of your models, you can use this. It also, if your opponent spent a turn debuffing one of your pieces, you can choose to ignore all those effects once per game and waste all your opponent's hard work. It's a pretty solid artifact that can really sort of have some nice uses during the game. And so then we have the spell lore. So we have 6 spells available to the Stormcast Eternals, and all of your wizards, including your unique units, have access to the spell lore. First of all, we have Lightning Blast, which is a 5 to cast and does D3 mortal wounds to the closest enemy unit. This has no range on the spell, so this can, shoot 48 inch if that is the closest enemy unit. Pretty cool for a turn 1 spell to just do some mortal wounds across the table, or indeed not too bad as a little protection spell on your wizards if any chaff units come near them with its low casting value. It's pretty nice. Azerite Halo is next. We get to pick one of our units, and save rolls of a 6 do mortal wounds back to the attacking unit. This combines pretty well with a re-rollable save roll, so something like the Drake Scale Armour and this spell used on that same unit could be really nice, especially on something like a big monster fighting a horde of models that are going to put through a lot of hits that aren't necessarily going to do a lot to you. This is going to be some extra splash damage against your opponent. This could work really well on, say, a Star Drake, the Drake Scale Armour, re-rolling against all those multi-damage attacks potentially from a unit with, say, damage 2 weapons, flinging back. Celestial Blades is next, and pretty simple, 5 to cast, +1 wound for melee attacks. A really nice spell here, which is suitable for a ton of different units. Particularly works well on your Redeemer units that don't have a great sort of wounding roll. Can really make Liberators sort of actually do some damage. Chain Lightning is next, a 6 to cast for this spell, D3 mortal wounds to one enemy unit within range of the spell, and you roll a dice for each enemy unit within 6 inch of the original target. On a 3+, those units will also take D3 mortal wounds. Really good for sort of dealing with your opponent, sort of bunkering together units or indeed characters that need to stick near each other. Thundershock is next, 6 to cast once more, and you roll a dice for each enemy unit within range of the caster. That's projection from the caster generally, and on a 3+, you subtract 1 from hit rolls for that unit. A nice sort of spell. If you can get this into an area with your caster where you've got loads of units to affect, can be really useful. Starfall is perhaps, I think, my favourite spell from the whole lore, where you pick a point on the battlefield within the range of the spell and roll a dice for each enemy unit within 3 inch of the chosen point. On a 3+, those units cannot pile in. This can be really good for sort of setting up some of your charges and getting the most damage out of your units while not allowing your opponent to get the maximum amount of damage out of their own. There are some solid spells in the Stormcast Eternal lore. I think you've got some good utilities, some good mortal wound spread, as well as some good buffs on your own units as well. And while you don't have, I guess, any direct spells that are going to affect your units negatively affecting your units, or your opponent's units rather, Azerite Halo is a good sort of counter spell to play the sort of bait game and test your opponent whether they really want to charge the unit that has actually got that spell on them. Next up, we look at the prayers for the Stormcast Eternals, and first of all, we have Divine Light. This prayer is answered on the roll of a 3+. You pick one enemy unit within range of this prayer, and you can reroll hit rolls of 1 for attacks that target that unit until your next hero phase. This is really cool. If you have an opposing unit you really want to see dead, you can hit it with multiple of your own units, be that with ranged or combat attacks, and get rerolls for all of your units. A really useful utility spell to have that can really sort of help bring down your opponent's big Death Star blobs. Next up, we have Translocation. Now, this prayer does have an FAQ on it in the FAQs available from Warhammer Community, so it has got some extra rules on top of the ones printed inside your battle tome. It is Translocation. It's answered on a 3+. Once again, you pick a friendly unit within range and you can teleport them anywhere on the battlefield outside of 9 inch away from enemy units. The part that they've added to the FAQ is to bring it in line with all these other rules for teleports in the game, and that is that you cannot move after you've been affected by this prayer. So the person casting the prayer can certainly move, but the unit that is teleported cannot. If this is the caster cannot. And lastly, we have Bless Weapons. Once again, answered on a 3+. You pick a friendly unit within range. For each 6 to hit that unit gets in melee, you will score 2 hits instead of 1. And also, this will also work on your shooting attacks as well. So you can have this on ranged and shooting. It's actually pretty good on a unit that has both weapons. Things like Vanguard Hunters or Vanguard Paladors really benefit from this rule. Now, if you're looking to add prayers to your Stormcast Eternals force, I cannot recommend a Lord Relictor more. You can find this model available in the Thunderstrike Brotherhood box set. It is a fantastic priest model. It gets +1 to all prayers, so all of the prayers we've just talked about go off on a 2+. Really, really useful priest to have. You do have other options in the Knight Relictor, who, for me, at the current, I think the Lord Relictor is just better. His +1 is so much better. The Lord Veritant's an interesting option as well for a different priest as well. Moving on to the mount traits for the army. And first of all, we have Etheric Swiftness. This is only available to Griff Chargers, Dracoth, and Dracolines, so your smaller creatures. And this just gives them the ability to, first of all, be selected to and pile in an attack within 6 inch rather than 3. I find this is really useful on some of your lighter heroes that perhaps don't have more of the defensive benefits. So on your Griff charges, I think this is really useful. Being able to move them around with their decently fast movement of 12, get them to where you want, and then do a 6-inch pile in as well. This is also really cool because if your opponent tries to pile in too close to where you've teleported to, you can potentially draw your opponent in to allow the Aquila after its teleport with some fancy maneuvering, though that is harder to do. I do like it on the Lord Aquila as it just gives him lots of versatility, ability to retreat, the ability to get those 6-inch pile-ins on him is really nice when you combine this with the Rides the Wind Etheric rule as well. So he can be really hard to sort of stop and hurt. Then we have the Light of the Young Stars. This is only available to Star Drakes, and you get to use this ability instead of a monstrous rampage. You pick one enemy unit within 1 inch and roll a dice. On a 3+, you subtract 1 from that unit's hit rolls. This is really cool. You combine this with Master of Celestial Menagerie on a Star Drake as its command ability. You can potentially be -1 to hit and -1 to wound, which is really, really nice. I like using this in combination with it. It's a solid mount trait on a Star Drake in combination with that command trait as well. We then have Celestial Instincts, which is simply retreat and charge. For me, the best model to have this on by far is the Lord Celestin on Dracoth. You give it the glaive, so he's got damage 3 on the charge. This allows him to, every turn, retreat out and then charge and get that damage 3 on his weapon every turn, really upping the damage potential of the model. Not only that, but it's nice to have a little bit more, I guess, maneuverability on the Dracoths. They're not the fastest cavalry in the world, and this just gives him some options to pull out of fights he no longer needs to be in, go and help with those damage 3 charging weapon hits in a fight where he's needed more. Next we have Envoy of Lightning. So this one can only be used if you're using the Signs of the Storm battle traits. Don't pick this if you haven't got that ability in your army because it will literally do nothing for you. You roll a dice though for every enemy unit within 10 inches of this model after it's set up using the Signs of the Storm battle trait ability, and roll a dice for each of those units within 10 inch. On a 4+, they suffer D3 mortal wounds. This of course works best on models with a large base. Star Drake has the biggest base in the army, but things like a Taurolon could also get really good benefit out of this, and even having something smaller to sort of pop in the middle of your opponent's lines. So using something like the Griff Charge or Dracoline, Griff Charge is potentially being pretty useful with this as well because you can drop down and then fly away with your Ride the Wind's Etheric if you get the turn after as well on a double and not receive any punishment for it. There's some cool uses to do some nice splash damage with this. And with Stormcast Eternals having access to other splash damage abilities across their army, this could be really nice to sort of just put through those few extra mortal wounds. Next we have Scintillating Trail. You subtract 1 from unbinding rolls for enemy wizards for spells cast by friendly Stormcast wizards wholly within 12 inch of this unit. Now, of course, this is best on the Lord Arcanums that can be mounted. It's best on your wizard heroes. It could also go well if you give the Arcane Tome to another mounted hero as well, but, you know, it just naturally goes best with the Lord Arcanum options on Griff Charger, Dracoline, or Taurolon. And lastly, we have Thunderous Presence. This is only available to Draconif, so this means only the Knight Draconis can take this ability. You can use it instead of a monstrous rampage. You pick one enemy unit within 1 inch, roll a dice for that unit, and on a 3+, they cannot receive command abilities in the following Battle Shock phase. It's only got the one character currently it can go on, so it's obvious who is best to take this one, and it's not a bad one at all. Being able to stop Battle Shock after you hit someone with some Dracothian Guard, or indeed a Knight Draconis or Stormdrake Guard, or any of your heavy hitting units is amazing. And now we move into looking at Holy Commands. These are unique enhancements for the Stormcast Eternals. They're once per game command abilities. You get to pick one of these for your army, and you can indeed pick multiple of these if you choose to take extra enhancements, and though you can never pick the same Holy Command twice. The first one is Call for Aid. When a friendly Redeemer unit of 5 models or less is destroyed, you can use this command ability to set up an identical unit on the tabletop to the one destroyed. What's pretty good for this? So I think 2 units really benefit from this. Liberators certainly by far are the most I guess, best bang for buck unit in 5 model units in the Stormcast book. They're cheaper, so they're a really solid shout to have this ability used on them. However, I like using on Vindictors as well, as Vindictors' main, I guess, thing against them is they are relatively expensive compared to Liberators in 5-man units. This, though, means that the Vindictors, who are generally harder to remove than the Liberators, can indeed get more use out of them, and get more use out of this because they can be harder to remove twice rather than the Liberators. So they are definitely the 2 units I suggest on this. We then have Steadfast March, which can give run and charge to a friendly Stormcast Eternal units. And once again, I think there's 2 options for this. First of all, this can obviously make your faster units, things like Vanguard Paladors, Dracothian Guard, Stormdrake Guard, and all of that, better with the ability to run and charge, but it also works well on things like Retributors and your other Paladin units that are slower moving. This gives those units that can hit relatively hard, but are, I guess, hindered by being quite slow, can get that extra movement across the table. Of course, you could use this in the movement phase, then roll your run, and then, of course, get your charge after, so you've got all that extra movement there to potentially get them across the table that much quicker. And so next we have Thunderbolt Volley. This allows a unit to shoot in the hero phase and still shoot later in the turn as well. This, of course, is best on our Mortal Wound shooting units for the Stormcast Eternals. Things like Vanguard Raptors with long strike crossbows are amazing with this command ability used on them. On average, a unit of 6 of these using Thunderbolt Volley can take a Maw Crusher off the table in a single turn. So really, really devastating. A great Alpha Strike use for your army. Judicators are another fantastic unit to use this on in large units as well. 15 Judicators using this can put out a ton of potential damage hurt, and generally those Judicators will be better against more targets across the game and be able to affect units as much. The Vanguard Raptors do suffer from a lack of shots, so they'll be good at taking out, I guess, big targets with, say, 16 or so wounds, but they won't necessarily take out like large blobs like the Judicators have the potential to with the amount of shots and damage they can put out from them. And so, Holy Commands, Unleash Thy Hatred. One Paladin unit can add +1 attack to its melee weapons once per game in the combat phase. This is really great on units that don't have a lot of attack, so things like Annihilators with Grand Hammers definitely get this, and you can combine this with the Knight's Excelsior ability that's going to give them +1 to hit and wound as well, so you can get some really good stacks of abilities here. This also works well with Decimators, giving them an extra attack on top of the 2 they already get for being outnumbered, if they are indeed outnumbered, and then using the Knight's Excelsior ability to get +1 to hit and wound, going down to 2s and 2s with something like 7 attacks each per model at Ren 2 damage 1. And the last one we've got is Final Thunderstrike. So this one for me is pretty cool on larger units and larger models. Lots of wounds are what you want here. So add 1 to the rolls for your Blaze of Glory rules once per game. So this is a 1, doesn't get the whole unit at all times, but it's 1 phase rolling your Blaze of Glory. You get +1 to all of your rolls. So this works really well, first of all, on things like Star Drakes that have just a lot of wounds to throw out, so that's 5, but also on like a large unit of Vindictors, this could be pretty darn cool as well, as they each get 3 dice when they die, and then doing them on 5s could be really nice if they are going to take a hammering. This is, of course, a great sort of play to make if your opponent's going to completely annihilate one of your units to get that extra sort of damage out before, if your unit dies. Good for fighting against something that's got always strikes first or anything like that. So, moving into sub-factions, you get to pick one of these for your army, as we mentioned at the start of the video, and they give you some cool little extra abilities. Hammers of Sigmar is the first one, where friendly Hammers of Sigmar units hold within 12 inch of an objective have a 6+ ward save. So this, I guess one of the things I see people getting wrong is within an objective. So you don't get this if you're spread over 2 objectives. You must be wholly within range of 1 objective on your unit to get this. I particularly like this on Liberators. Liberators in a Stormkeep army in particular. Those units are going to be pumping out mortal wounds to units, charging them to units in combat with them at the end of the combat phase, and the fact that this is going to make them stick around and be harder, this is a great sort of combination of rules to stick together for your Liberators. So next, Hallowed Knights. If a friendly Redeemer unit is slain within 3 inches of an enemy unit, remembering Redeemers are our Vindictors, Liberators, and Sequitors, you roll a dice. On a 4+, that unit may fight before it is removed. For me, I like this on units with good reach, and so for me, it's Vindictors all the way that I like this rule on. You can actually get this rule and then combine it with a model like Gardas to actually get the Hammers of Sigmar ward save benefits as well on top, as Gardas provides a 5+ ward aura around him as well. So there's some great combinations you could be using for a 5+ ward aura and then actually fighting when you die with decent reach, meaning, you know, even models in larger units can pile in and fight. So you've got some extra abilities there to get some more attacks through. Celestial Vindicators. At the start of the combat phase, you can pick one friendly unit that's charged, and when that unit makes any attack rolls, any hits of a 6 generate 2 hits instead of 1 for those attacks. For me, I actually like this on Sequitors. Sequitors have a rule where they can choose to either empower their shields or weapons. If they empower their weapons, they get exploding 6s to hit, much the same as what this rule provides. However, if they choose to empower their shields, they get a 5+ ward in close combat. This is why I like it, because you can choose to empower your shields and then use the Celestial Vindicators rule to charge and actually get the best of both worlds out of your Sequitur unit, because you'll get both abilities technically on the War Scroll. Anvils of the Heldenhammer. Now this is a little interesting one. So at the end of the charge phase, you can roll 2d6 for each enemy unit within 1 inch of friendly Anvils of the Heldenhammer units. If the roll is greater than the target's bravery, then you can ignore the first 2 wounds caused by attacks made by that enemy unit in the following combat phase. For me, this one requires you to get bravery debuffs on the board, and for me, I think Stormkeep is a great way to get there, as Cities of Sigmar has a ton of units that provide bravery debuffs. Things like the Charybdis put out -1 bravery, Dark Riders do as well, the Free Guild General on Griffin can put out minuses to bravery as well, and there's some other units in there as well that get you some ability to put out bravery debuffs. Some of the endless spells can work really well in concert with this as well, and you've also got the ability to bring in allies as well to get those bravery debuffs in your army. And so we talked about this before. Knights Excelsior give you +1 to hit and wound if you're outnumbered with one of your paladin units. This just combines great with the Holy Command Unleash Thy Hatred for +1 attack, giving you +1 to hit, wound, and +1 attack. A fantastic combination on any of your paladin units, which also become battle line in this sub-faction. Celestial Warbringers next, and once per phase you can reroll a hit, wound, or save roll for a single Celestial Warbringers unit. What's really cool about this is it works well on MSU. Celestial Warbringers have some really cool models available to them, and just when you're playing like multiple small units, being able to make those rolls count for those very important attacks, things like Prosecutors with their Javelins or Grand Hammer Annihilators and stuff like that, we have these limited amount of high quality attacks where you're really going to want to use Celestial Warbringers. Tempest Lords are next, and you can reroll one of the dice when charging with your Tempest Lord units. Once again, this is really good on Prosecutors. Prosecutors get to roll 3 dice when they charge, so being able to reroll one of those dice can be really important to make some massively long charges. Now, this does also work well in combination with some of the mount traits we have access to, like Celestial Instincts with Retreat and Charge can really do well with this. Or indeed, using this with like Steadfast March on a unit to give them run and charge and then re-roll one of those dice when charging is a really nice combination for the units. And lastly, we have the Astral Templars, who get immunity to monstrous rampages. This, for me, this is good on literally any unit. However, I do like it on units that can pack a punch, but don't necessarily like taking mortal wounds or being not able to use command abilities during the combat phase. So for me, Vanguard Paladors are a big winner. They also become battle line using the subfaction Astral Templars, but large units of like Liberators or high quality attack units, things like Protectors in a unit of 10 or something like that, really benefit from immunity to monstrous rampages, allowing them to get all those bonuses to really stick that damage through to the opponent. Well, that's the end of the video. Thank you all for watching. Please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe if you have not already. And also, why not drop us a comment below and let us know what you enjoyed about the video. If you'd like to come chat more with me and other members of our little community here at Cinderful Gaming, you can do so by following the link in the video's description to our Discord server. Also, if you'd like to help support the channel more and in another way, you can do so either by supporting on Patreon or YouTube members. You can do either of these by following the links in the video's description, and as a special thing for everyone who would like to give a shout out first of all to our Patreons: Christian Weir, James, Soren, Greenskins Gaming, AJC, Kenny Lowell, Outer and Shot First, Andrew Bowen, Nathan Fee, The Rising Ape, Q Dynamic, Agu, Anthony B, Anton Nilsson, JJ Austrian, Average Wargamer, Domer, Mark Harvey, James Cater, and Samuel. And a special shout out as well to our YouTube members: Greenrich Gaming, Kenton Young, Chris Wallace, Ronya, Vinny, Lockloric, The Johnny84, David Ellsworth, Revenar, Wolfric Nick, Broken Chef, and Sean Scott. Lastly, a special thank you to, first of all, Lady Witchfox Art, who does all the amazing artwork for the channel you can see here, and to Xmorphic, who does all the amazing background work for our Discord server, making sure it all works nice and properly over there. Thank you all for watching once again, everyone. Stay safe, stay well, and most of all, keep fighting that war against the grey. Ciao for now.